Welcome back to the Veteran Teacher Files. I'm your host, the Dragon Lady. So, funny story. These articles popped up on my phone the other day, and I'm pretty sure it's because of this podcast. You know how the algorithm starts tracking what you're interested in, and then suddenly it's decided that every article I'm ever going to read is about education. So, yeah, anyways, one of the articles kind of made me stop in my tracks. It referenced Harvard, and apparently Harvard has reported that roughly 60% of its undergraduate grades are now A's. And faculty there have raised concerns about grade inflation and whether grades are still serving their original purpose. And then another article popped up, and this one was about UC San Diego, where faculty have raised concerns about incoming students' readiness for college-level work, particularly in the areas like math and quantitative reasoning, with more students reportedly needing remediation despite strong transcripts and high GPAs. So that kind of had me sitting there like, yeah, something's off here. Not because students aren't capable, not because teachers aren't working hard. The math just ain't mathin'. Now, before anyone comes for me, this episode isn't about blaming Harvard. It's not about blaming UC San Diego. And it's not even really about college. It's about something that started to click when I connected those articles with my own experience in the classroom. I've been a credentialed classroom teacher since 2005. That means I've lived through a few shifts in how we define success in education. I mean, I remember overhead projectors. I used paper grade books, paper attendance sheets, and I remember paper STAR tests before California moved into CASP and Common Core. But one of the biggest shifts that I've lived through so far has been No Child Left Behind. Now, for anyone who's newer to education, here's the quick version. No Child Left Behind, NCLB, or NICLB, was a federal education law passed in 2001 under President George W. Bush, so Jr., and it required public schools across the United States to test students annually in reading and math, track performance by student subgroups, and publicly report results. Schools were judged on whether they made adequate yearly progress, and consequences could follow if they did not meet targets. The intention was equity. The intention was accountability. And those aren't small things. But over time, it changed the culture of schooling. Because once schools are measured by numbers, everything starts becoming about numbers. It started simple. How are the kids doing? And then it became, what do the scores say? And then, what does the dashboard say? And eventually, what does the dashboard say about what the scores are saying? Somewhere along the way, the scoreboard stopped reflecting the game and started becoming the game itself. And I saw this firsthand in a very real way. So a few years back, I taught first grade at a very high-performing school. And when I say high-performing, I mean strong scores, strong teachers, strong families, everything you want on paper. And if you haven't checked out the California dashboard, that's where all these subgroups and these things are reported. And at this school, we were consistently hitting blue and green, which are the good colors on the dashboard. But I do remember walking out of a staff meeting one day and saying to my grade level partners, like, why am I feeling so stressed out? Like, we're not even in testing grades. So think about that. First grade, no state testing. And yet the pressure in that room felt like we were preparing for something much bigger. At that school, data ruled every meeting. Our principal said the word data so often that my team and I created a game. Every time he said data, we took a drink from our water bottles. And by the end of the meeting, we weren't necessarily better teachers, but we were extremely hydrated. The real school improvement plan was apparently kidney health. But here's the part that stuck with me. That school wasn't struggling. That was a successful school. Yet it still felt like we were constantly in a state of urgency. All right, so here's another school, many moons ago, where there were actual teacher bonuses tied to student performance. I know, wild, but there was actual money. Not a jeans day pass, not pizza in the staff lounge, but like real financial incentives tied to student outcomes. And I taught kindergarten, and we used Fontes and Pinnell reading levels. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to tell you guys these stories. And the goal was to have a certain percentage of students reading at a specific level by March. So I'm going to be very honest here. Nobody told me to cheat. Nobody told me to manipulate scores. But when March rolled around and I had a handful of students sitting right on that bubble, not clearly meeting the target, not clearly not meeting the target, just close, I noticed something uncomfortable. I started looking at those students differently. Not dramatically, not maliciously, just subtly. And that's the part people don't always understand about incentives. They don't have to force behavior, they just have to shape it. So I'm not proud of what I did, but yeah, I used my teacher objectivity to boop and bump some of those kids over. Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but I did it. All right, here's another story. Remember STAR testing? Yeah. So back in the day, there were these paper STAR testing days, the state testing days. And this is before everything became digital, before CASP, before the dashboards and the instant reporting. And this is back when testing meant sharpened pencils, bubble sheets, and silence that felt heavier than it should have been. So I remember this principal that I worked with encouraging students to come to her office to check their work. Now, was there cheating occurring behind closed doors? I don't know. But there sure were a lot of eraser marks in those books. And that reflected the atmosphere perfectly. Because at that school, we weren't talking about curiosity. We weren't talking about the learning. We were talking about performance. Scores, percentages, targets, growth, always data. So, when I was at that high-performing school, when I walked out of that meeting, asking my grade level partners, why am I so stressed? We're not even in the testing grades. That sentence right there has stayed with me for years. Because what I realized later is that the pressure doesn't start in the testing grades. It can start earlier than that if it spreads everywhere. So we celebrate graduation rates going up. We celebrate suspension rates going down. We even celebrate tackling chronic absenteeism. But in all of my years, as report cards and GPAs trend upwards, dashboard scores are telling a much flatter story. And that's where I start asking different questions. The kindergarten students I taught in 2009 are now in their early 20s. They are college-aged adults. The students entering university today, the ones showing up in reports from places like Harvard and UC San Diego, are part of the same educational pipeline. They grew up entirely inside the accountability era. They don't remember school before data walls. They don't remember benchmark assessments. They don't remember intervention cycles, progress monitoring, or dashboards that track everything. For them, that isn't a shift. That's just school. And that makes me wonder, are we looking at a college problem? Or are we looking at a long-term result of something that happens when an entire generation moves through 13 years of schooling where success is defined primarily through measurable outcomes? Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not saying accountability is bad. We absolutely should care about student learning. We absolutely should measure progress. But data was never supposed to be the destination. It was supposed to be a flashlight, something that helps us understand learning. Somewhere along the way, it started feeling like the destination itself. And after 20 years in education, here's what I know. People respond to what they're measured by. Teachers respond to it, administrators respond to it, districts respond to it, universities respond to it. We all respond to incentives, whether we realize it or not. So when I read about Harvard's A's and UC San Diego's raising concerns about student readiness, I don't think I'm looking at separate problems. I think I'm looking at different points along the same timeline. A timeline that starts long before college. A timeline shaped by accountability systems, policy shifts like No Child Left Behind, and a culture that increasingly equated success with numbers. And I keep coming back to my own classroom. First grade, no testing, no dashboards tied directly to my students, and yet somehow I still felt pressure I couldn't quite name at the time. That's what stays with me, because it suggests that pressure didn't just come from testing, it came from culture. So I'll leave you with this. I don't think this story starts at Harvard. I think Harvard is where we're finally noticing the end of a much longer story. And now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever worked in a school or any organization where the metric became more important than the thing it was supposed to measure? Do you think today's college students are a product of this long accountability era, or is something else going on entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this episode resonated with you, please follow, subscribe, and share the Veteran Teacher Files with an educator in your life. I'm your host, the Dragon Lady, and I'll see you next time.